Ross Rayburn is the lead instructor for yoga and meditation at Peloton and the author of Turning Inward, the practice of introversion for a calm, joyful, and authentic life. In stores now. I got my copy right here. Ross, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Now, the book was just released a couple of weeks after the new year, which I love because a lot of times people make a resolution to be more calm, more centered, or to do things to make them more at peace. And maybe didn't exactly know the way to do that. And this is a perfect way for people to maybe pick up this book now and not let go of their resolution.
I always have I have a friend that whenever someone says something nice, his response is, that was my bad ear. Can you say that again? Well, that's a wonderful compliment. Thank you so much. This is gonna sound completely hokey, but I really do mean it. One of my other friends who he's the last person that would ever be able to meditate. And when he read the book, he basically, it seemed to help him. And I know this sounds really cheesy, but it's really all icing on the cake from here on out. I love people, and I love what I hated meditation. And my teacher, Sally Kempton, among many other teachers, taught me eventually how to get out of my I wasn't ever diagnosed with ADD, but I think if that would have been common in the 80s when I was a kid, I probably would have been. And so she helped me find a way to do what I do now. And that's ultimately actually why I wrote the book, is I care about people like me, who think they would never be able to find some peace. And I honestly, I couldn't believe that no one had not written this book. I was shocked that no one had written a book for people like me who just need to be told, you're probably already meditating, you just don't call it meditation.
Because you talk about you scrolling your phone, watching Real Housewives, that all these things can be a version of meditating, and maybe not in the traditional sense, but talk about what that would mean, different versions of meditating for anybody watching.
Well, yeah, and first of all, I give props to my teachers, and again, Sally was she just passed last year, and I like to say she's kind of like Obi-Wan and Yoda. She's more powerful on that side than I think she even was here. And she was a traditional meditation teacher. She studied in India and was a Swami in the Siddha Yoga tradition. And I do traditional meditation, and I always like to give credit for that I am a believer in the different kinds, like TM and Vedic and all sorts of different, like Kashmir Shaivite meditations. So that's all wonderful. However, to answer your question, and I often like to do this whenever I am asked a good or sincere question. I like to practice what I preach and turn inward, and just make sure what I'm about to say is from a place from my heart, not from my head. I believe that ultimately people, especially in our world today, it's so easy to stay in what I call the binary navigation mind, right, wrong, that the part of our mind that keeps us from crossing the street in traffic. And that it's so that oftentimes we binge a show, we scroll, whatever we do to escape and get into that part of our mind that's a little bit more liminal, a little bit more nebulous, a little bit like an escape. I think that is the heart saying you got to get out of your mind and get into your heart. So that's what I mean when I say you're probably already doing something to escape. All that I say in the book is, if before, during, or after, if you can just say to yourself, I am doing this thing that actually can be addictive, by the way, and does have negative consequences not in moderation, and that's an important caveat. But if you can say to yourself, I just binged that show for the purpose of relaxing, that what happens is you start to string together these moments of away, a moment of being, of decatastrophizing, of stepping back from, I call it the precipice of panic. And even if you just recognize in that moment that it was something that was affirmative and healthy for you, then all of a sudden it becomes a kind of meditation, and you start to string those together. And then you start to get more, it becomes more habitual, and the benefits start to compound. And all of a sudden, a month, a year, 10 years later, you look around and you've woven this tapestry of integrity and creativity and wisdom that cost you nothing, other than maybe the very difficult work of recognizing your intention in doing what you already do.
Now, with more traditional types of meditation, and maybe someone who wants to start it, but maybe hasn't given themselves that space to do so. Obviously, if you look on the Peloton platform, there's, you can do 5 minutes, you can do 10 minutes. It doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but it's a conscious effort of making that space in your life. Maybe talk to that person who might be afraid to take that first step.
Because it's a fantastic question. I believe it's an important question, and it's a layered question. So let me do my best at being concise. I have a friend who calls me, he uses an expletive, so I'll say F instead of the expletive. He calls me Ross, land the effing plane Rayburn. So I will do my best to answer in the Reader's Digest. Those of you that don't know what that is, look it up. I'll be 53 in February, so I make those kind of references. Also, real quick, shout out to my Peloton yoga and meditation team, because when you do go onto the Peloton app, chances are I'm not everyone's teacher. I realized that a long time ago, and I just always encourage people at whatever point you come to the Peloton app for yoga and meditation, make sure to try out everybody, because I have such a wonderful team and we all are a little bit different. We share a lot of things, but that is one of the most important elements or facets to answer this question is know that there are so many things that go into a class, and especially in meditation, and not giving up and trying different people is important. Now, to answer your question, one of the main reasons why I called the book Turning Inward, actually I called it Thinning the Veil, which means something else, and my editor, even though I was attached to my working title for 10 years, she was right. Turning Inward is a much better title. And I use the word introversion, which is a term I got from Carlos Pomelo, one of my teachers. I use those two terms instead of the word meditation, because a lot of times just by using the word meditation, it turns people off immediately. It's a conversation stopper. And so if you think of it first as turning inward, that's my first bit of advice, so that you don't put any of the should mentalities. Oh, I should stop my thoughts, which can't be done, by the way. You can have apparent moments of stillness, but you're still thinking. Your neurons are still firing, otherwise you would die. You don't have to sit still. A lot of the things that we're taught about meditation, which all have value, don't necessarily apply. So how to start depends on who you are. If you're someone like me, when I first started and hated meditation, I closed my eyes and it was torture. Then maybe what you do is what I alluded to earlier, where you already do what you do and just have a moment of recognition, like scroll through Instagram. I just did that, or I'm about to do that for the purpose of relaxing. Or maybe you pick something that you do every day, like brush your teeth. And you pick a moment for once a week, I'm going to put the toothpaste on my toothbrush, and before I'm going to sit my hand down, and then before I put the toothbrush on my teeth, I'm going to take one deep breath. And that one deep breath is going to be, and you fill in the blank what you need. I need peace. I need relaxation. I need creativity. I'm stuck in a difficult relationship at work or at home, and I need a solution. So whatever it is, you put that in that one deep breath, and then you brush your teeth. Or maybe you already have some kind of practice to where you can close your eyes. Then I would say that's a good moment to go on to the Peloton. There's free classes. There's all these different versions that you can go on, and you filter for Ross Rayburn. No, I'm just kidding. No, and then you try everybody, because again, like, I'm not kidding, my team, and I say my team because I'm the lead instructor, but we're like the Supreme Court. We're all equal, and I'm not kidding. I consider all of them friends and teachers to me.
I mean, just since you mentioned that, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the Peloton platform, pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic, and maybe the messages you get on social media, or when someone sees you on the street, or someone is out to dinner, you might be out somewhere and someone just wants to say a quick thank you, and just realizing the impact that the platform has done, for so many people. Because I just feel like, I look at you and I watch your videos and I take your classes, but you feel like we're friends. Like, that's the thing too, especially about that platform, and especially going through the pandemic and needing an outlet, that you feel, you go to these people, whether it's, you or Dennis or Cody or Emma or Robin, or, whoever's classes you might take, and you feel that connection and you feel something different, either once you're done with your practice or, off the bike.
Can I tell you one of my favorite stories? I was I was that a yes?
Yes, yes. Please tell me. Yes.
Okay, good. I was on a trip and going through security, and it's a little bit like, it's not a vulnerable moment, but I'm not thinking about Peloton Ross in that moment. I'm thinking about, did I put on my liquids? Like, when you think, you're like, please, I hope I didn't mess up, because that's another 15 minutes when you wait for your bag to get checked.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
So you're like, and this woman very sweetly walks up and she's like, oh my gosh, you're Ross Rayburn from Peloton. And I'm like, yeah, I am. She said, I love Dennis's yoga classes. I was like,
Thank you.
so do I. Um, so yeah, no, it's great. It's all good. But one of the funny things about, I'm known for my sleep meditations, and I don't do them. I fall asleep really, really easily, and most of the time. And I meditate in the morning mostly. Again, Sally Kimpton, one of her helps for me was, she said, shower before meditation, because there's something about the cleansing ritual. Obviously dry off, get ready. I usually shower, shave, get ready, and then I have a whole routine, a whole thing that I do to create a beautiful meditation space in the morning, oftentimes 4 a.m., 5 a.m., because I get up really early every day. Chris, my husband, whenever we're walking in the street and I get recognized, people come up to me and say it like as if they're the first person who's ever thought of this joke. But I'm going to ruin it, by the way, for anyone who ever wants to say it to me now. But it happens so often, I can't even tell you. And Chris is a pretty famous guy. So like, people walk up and push past him and say, oh my gosh, you're the only person that my husband lets me sleep with besides him. And poor Chris like rolls his eyes, and it's so awkward. I don't know what to say. And it's really funny is what's hilarious. It's the first like 300 times it was funny. So the answer to your question is, being on the Peloton app is an absolute honor. We only have 7, when members come and take class, we only have 7 mats in the room. And I was worried about that initially, because often when I owned a yoga studio in Los Angeles back in the aughts, and whenever there were only 7 people in the room, in Texas we say it's like pushing a rope uphill. You need a certain amount of energy to create a vibe. And so I was concerned that we wouldn't have that with only 7. What's turned out is the energy is actually wonderful. And unlike the cycling classes where when we do pictures afterward, they kind of have to, they can't stop and really talk very often, because it would take 3 hours. But because we only have 7 people, I get to spend a couple of minutes individually with everybody.
There's also a chapter of the book that I love about the two identities that most people carry, their true self and the identity that we present to the world. So whether it's in the workplace, with your family, with your church, and your community, those two identities can be very different, especially for LGBTQ people across the country and across the world. Talk a little bit about that chapter and including that in the book.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, that is a topic that is full of importance and sensitivity and nuance. And so it's a challenging one to talk about in brief, but I really appreciate the question so much, and thank you for asking it. I do it's actually mostly talked about. I mean, I definitely talk about it throughout the intro of the way the book is structured. The intro is kind of really the most personal memoir, kind of how I came to this practice. And then I talk about growing up in a Southern Baptist church in the 80s in Texas and in the closet for a long period of time and what that was like. And then the reference to the true self and the multifaceted selves that we present to the world as a context. That kind of comes as the book is structured. First, what do I mean by turning inward? The second chapter, Separation Paradox, is the idea is we are all multifaceted beings. We divide ourselves into work, sports teams you love, different facets of who you are in different relationships, all the different presentations we make. And then there is the separation between all those different facets and themselves, and the separation in what is your whole self, which is there's a part of us that is presented that feels separate often from the part of us that we know is deep down. And here's what's in the book. Both are real. If there's anything that I would wish people do is stop vilifying the projected self, and definitely stop vilifying what my teacher referred to as the blue pearl in the core of your heart. That who you are deep down has more value than you could ever understand. And who you project to the world has more potential value than you could ever and who you project to the world has more potential value than you've even ever dreamed of yet. And so stop saying to yourself that one is bad, one is good. And this is why I called it thinning the veils originally, was the veil that exists between them, the separation paradox. Start to find bridges so that you realize that the projected self is a projection of who you are. And that the more connected they can be through that little practice of taking a deep breath in, the more you'll turn around and you'll be like, oh, I actually feel more authentic. I have my imposter syndrome isn't as strong as it used to be. And all of a sudden, you start to see patterns, you start to have insights. And what begins to happen, and this is really the beautiful message in the book, is you shift from becoming someone who wants and needs to someone who makes offerings and is generous and is a beacon of light to people who need it.
Speaking of being a beacon of light to people who need it, I think that the parts where you are centered in yourself are so important. But there's a chapter which I think is just worth the price of the book alone on dealing with other people, and whether it's your coworkers, your family members, your neighbors, somebody, a stranger who might randomly irritate you, and dealing with that. I think that is such an important thing of looking into yourself, building bridges with other people. Talk a little bit about creating that chapter, because that is so important, and I think that's going to change so many people's outlook on life.
I mean, I think so to be fairly honest, like when people are out of balance, and we all share these things, if you're in a bad space, you're either typically sad, anger, which is mine, or fearful. Anger is not always bad if you know how to step back from it. If you know how to recognize it and take a breath and catalyze the anger into a courageous act of service, which is go inside in the moment when you want to fight. Because sometimes fighting is the right choice. But to go inside and say, what is the most courageous thing I can do in this moment, given the things that you don't know? You don't know why that person hurt you or hurt someone. It might have not had anything to do with you. It often doesn't. And so in that moment, if you can turn inward in the moment when you're either sad, anger, or fearful. And this is one of my favorite visualizations. The nebulous inner landscape of turning in has this strange shared perspective with a 30,000-foot aerial view. And in the same way, when you rise above and you can see the patterns of what's happening below, there's something about learning how to turn inside, especially in a moment of anger, where you have that aerial view inside.
I do want to ask excuse me, about some of your famous celebrity friends who have either taken your classes or have written a nice little message here in the book. You know, Frankie Grande, Billy Porter, Missy Copeland, Wilson Cruz, people who I see living their authentic lives. And obviously, you know, you're friends with them. I've never met any of them, but it seems like their true self and the person that they project into the world is almost the same. And it's wonderful to see how meditation and your classes have kind of helped them to become the people that they are today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I got a message today. I always want to be careful about revealing those things. I love that you mentioned the people that I've posted about on social media. I got a message today from someone who is very, very, very famous, and I had no idea that this person took my class. And this person's been famous for my entire life. And I'm still like this little kid from Texas. Like, I literally am like, what? Oh my God. And so it's kind of fun. I like Kyle Richards from Housewives was one of my first. Like I would always, sometimes my Instagram numbers, Ross Rayburn Yoga, by the way, follow me at Ross Rayburn Yoga. My numbers would go up by a bunch, and it would be because Kyle took one of my meditations.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if there's really a question in there other than just to say like I have been very fortunate to know people like Billy and Wilson and Misty and Zach Quinto and Tunde and Maisha Wynn and Dr. Sarah Gottfried, all who are on the back on the gave blurbs. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by people like Frankie, who is just, I can't even tell you what an incredibly wonderful human being that Frankie is, and I'm honored to know them. My hope with this book is that it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. Everybody breathes. Everybody has a blue pearl in their heart. Every person within the sound of my voice, or who can, you know, read this book, and I will hopefully find ways to get this book to people who can't afford to buy it, because I think that's important as well. Every person has an inside that they can turn into, and there is more wisdom and more creativity inside every single person than I can ever teach. And it doesn't cost you anything except for the cost of a deep breath and the courage to actually turn inside when it seems sometimes like that's scary to do.
Awesome, Ross. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a wonderful conversation. You're also coming to the Chicagoland area. You're going to be posting on your social media as far as when that's going to be, but hopefully sometime soon. And we will get all those details. You can also find him on the Peloton platform. And as he said, Ross Rayburn Yoga on Instagram. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. And definitely check out the book, Turning Inward.
Yeah,
Right
turning in, you can get it either in hardcover or I think at most of the retail sites. So thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you, everyone.